He walked through the door with a majestic strut and began down the long narrow stairway. The dreadfully grey walls that lined his path would seem to scream, "Stay away," to any normal person. But to this man, they were a warm welcome home. As he strutted down the stairs, a gloom could be felt about him. He was a man dressed in clothes fit for a king. The crimson blue that made up his immaculate robes shimmered with every step, even in this dull hallway with little light. In his right hand he carried a large wooden pole. It appeared to be 3 small trees, twisted around each other to a single point. At the top, it appeared that the roots of each tree had halfway covered a large yellow-orange sphere that seemed to resemble, if nothing else, the eye of a dragon. Of course, someone dressed like this could only be a mage, and a powerful one at that. As he reached the end of the stairway, his pool of gloom only seemed to deepen. Walking into the lavishly decorated room, the first thing one would notice would be the magnificent chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It appeared to be made of glass bones, and at the end, where the light bulbs would normally be, lay 8 glass bulbs, all broken, as if purposefully. Afterward, one would probably notice the rug that covered most of the floor. Its colors and patterns showed artistic beauty that were only seen in the throne rooms of some of the richest kings. The strange creature walking on that rug was probably the most unusual thing in this room. A young black gorilla, but he just called it a Jonathan. It was a creature not of his world. While he searched and searched for others of its kind, he hadn't even heard of such a creature, neither in books, nor in the tales of bards. It was obviously a baby, barely being a foot in height. It noticed him and walked to the couch, which seemed to radiate the color of the sea. No, it wasn't just the color. Waves and ripples could be seen on it, along with fish swimming around. If one weren't a mage of his caliber, they might even think this a magical aquarium, shaped like furniture. That wasn't the case, however. It was merely sewn with magical thread that gave it an astonishing appearance. The gorilla placed its hands atop the cushion and pulled itself up. Setting down like a human, it waited for him to sit beside it before speaking in the voice of an old man. That's right, not only could it speak, but this creature that appeared to be a baby was in fact an old man. Older even than this master mage that sat beside him. How did it go? The gloomy look that seemed to lightly paint his face earlier turned into a full-blown frown. If one weren't observant, they might even imagine a tear rolling down his cheek. I could only accomplish half my mission. They both sat there in silence for a minute as the mage continued. And how is she? The baby gorilla replied in his old man's voice. She's the same as always, in that room. So, is this the end of your journey? Not having the courage to speak, he lightly nodded his head. If one weren't observant, then that nod might not appear to be anything but a trick of the eye. But the baby old gorilla easily saw through it. The truth about this place was that it was a magical burrow, created by a famous powerful mage who died long ago. He was a collector of the most magnificent, wondrous, and otherworldly items known to man. This place could completely stop the aging process for any who entered it. Those who dwelt here did not need food, water, or sleep. It was not decorated with normal items, but magical enchanted ones. Even the walls and paint were enchanted with powerful magic. The landscape that covered the walls of each room was different. A tropical forest complete with singing birds. An active volcano guarded by a mighty dragon that would occasionally erupt. The only items in here that weren't enchanted were the items from other worlds. A strange wooden box the size of a man that would play music better than the best bards. A strange bitter drink called wine that contained a poison in just the right dosages to make those that drank it feel quite good without being particularly dangerous. Even the rug that sat in the first room was from another world. This place was named Dreamscape, a name that did not betray it, a veritable wonderland for all who entered. This was the reason that this man chose the profession of a mage. No, not just him, this could be said to have been the reason that half the mages nowadays chose their profession. Yet, he was the victor, the only one to discover this magnificent wonderland. He could remember the excitement the first time that he walked through those doors. So much so that he tripped and fell down the stairs. Him being such a powerful mage, one who had even conquered flight, to an outside observer, this would appear to be a powerful magical trap. But he knew that it wasn't so. It was his own distraction. He laughed at how weak he was back then. He was renowned as the most powerful mage in the Three Kingdoms. He was confident and victorious. He knew nothing though, nothing at all. He was powerless in the face of the world. When he stopped falling, what he saw was a sight that utterly disgusted him. 8 fairies, the equivalent of angels to the mages, were trapped and used as light bulbs in this strange chandelier. He quickly burst each bulb, making sure not to harm any of them in any way. They instantly flew out in fright. However, when he met up with them later, they remembered his kindness and shared their knowledge with him. That's when he decided to die in the eyes of the populace. He stayed away from cities where he was known and let his name fade into legend. Though, in this place, was also this baby gorilla and a once magnificent mermaid, kept as simple pets. No, they weren't even pets, just decorations. This place, that amazed him once upon a time. The wondrous mage that everyone looked up to, they all disgusted him to his very core now. This place should never have existed, and if it weren't for the 2 cursed creatures that called this place home, he would have destroyed it long ago. He slowly got up and began walking into a hallway, on one side a normal wall, on the other a large aquarium that looked like it was meant for a shark. However, it was empty. Whatever was in it was no more. He walked through a door into a gloomy room, decorated with symbols of death from many worlds. He found it strange at first, until he realized this fact. Because many symbols in here, such as the side, were seen as symbols of life, or completely different things in his own world. The rug that covered the floor was another magical item, endless sorrow. It created a rain that never stopped. Storm clouds covered the ceiling and continuously poured down. This was an illusion, though, from the point of view of an observer, it would appear to be real. The sound and even the sight of water draining down the faces of those within its area of effect, even their clothes, took a dampened appearance. But there was no coldness, no feeling of wetness whatsoever, just the appearance. In the center of the rug was a young beautiful girl. She refused to wear any clothes. But one would hardly notice by the gloominess of the room and the way that she was curled into a ball and crying. She had been like this for years now, since he discovered this place. A once glorious and proud creature, now lowered to this, and it was no one's fault but his own. When he had found this place, it contained 3 magical species. The 8 fairies, the old baby gorilla from another world, and a young beautiful mermaid. After releasing the fairies and calming the gorilla down, it explained everything to him. Even about the mermaid and her curse. It was a mermaid trapped in this tank. Normally a mermaid would be able to escape such a place with ease. But its magic was sealed by a powerful curse, leaving it helplessly stuck for the rest of its endless life. Normally its life wouldn't be endless, but the effects of the dreamscape affected it as well. Being confident in his own skills, he offered to remove the curse from the mermaid. Mermaids would normally be considered dreadful creatures that feasted on the flesh of men. But seeing this beautiful creature trapped for an eternity as nothing more than a decoration, even if it tried to eat him, he couldn't leave it be in this condition. Of course, mermaids were intelligent creatures, and while it would normally see a human mage as a delicacy, after helping her from this hellscape, she would naturally be grateful. But he didn't know this. He was overconfident in his own skills, and when he went to break the curse, he ended up worsening it. It was such a simple mistake that thinking back on it now made him slap himself in the face. It wasn't even a difficult curse, it was just his limited view and overconfidence. He should have cancelled his spell the moment it began to change. He should have. There were 1,000 things he should have done, but now wasn't the time. What was done, was done. The mermaid completely severed its connection with the monostream, the world's source of magic that allowed everyone to use this mysterious power. The curse before was blocking her connection, but now, there was no curse, and correspondingly, there was no connection. He could only wonder why his mistake had to punish something so beautiful. Why not him who made the mistake? When he thought about how simple it would have been to place her in a small tank and carry her to the nearest beach, it made him ashamed to call himself a mage. Left in the outside world, away from the caster who cursed her, the curse would have naturally faded over time. But now there was no chance of that. Maybe it was because he wanted to show off to the beauty that any man would die for. Or maybe he was really that confident in his skills. Either way, it didn't matter. What was done was done. But his spell didn't stop there. No, if it were that simple, he could still take her to the nearest beach. His spell took her tail. Well, saying that it took it might cause some misunderstanding. It turned it to a pair of human legs. And all right, she should be called a human now. A human that couldn't use magic. While one might not think much of this, to her, a mermaid, this would be the same as if someone took a person's legs and turned them into a large fin. Surely said person wouldn't consider it just another form of transportation, but would curse whomever did this to them, saying, "He took my legs." And so, turning her fin to legs was no better than cutting it off completely. In this way, he was even worse than the man that owned her before him. But alas, this wasn't a simple curse that could be removed. This was a permanent change that couldn't be fixed. One might ask how it was possible in the first place and why it couldn't simply be fixed with a spell that did the opposite. Well, that was beyond even the knowledge of the Fae. There was no way that a mere human could ever hope to return her to being a mermaid. Thus, he searched and searched the world over for some way to fix his mistake. It had been done, so there must have been some way to reverse the fact. Regardless of his searching, it was beyond his abilities. That being said, I'm back. She didn't even flinch. It was as if he weren't even there. The reason being, she was separated from the others. Mermaids were a social species, and being away from the others was bad enough, but in her current form, she could never hope to return. Mermaids couldn't breathe underwater. They could hold their breaths, but they didn't have gills like fish. However, they made their homes in underwater caves deep under the sea. No normal human could ever reach such a depth. The caves had natural air vents that would allow the mermaids to live there until they needed to eat. But in her current form, that was just an impossible dream, a faint passing memory that she longed for more than anything else. Surely, she must hate him now. She probably cursed his very existence. This thought ran through his head. "I brought you a gift," he said in a passing voice. The sorrow emanating from his words could clearly be heard. A slight twitch. What kind of gift was he referring to? He had never brought anything back before. Not for her at least. She didn't need food. No, she wouldn't accept it, even if he brought it. He didn't have the heart to catch another mermaid. The thoughts raced through her head, the curiosity overflowed as she slowly turned her head. "I know it's not the same, but I found this." He continued taking a charm bracelet off of his wrist. The average bystander might think it a normal charm bracelet, not even worth much at a market. But seeing this man wear it would tell anyone that was not the case. Everything this man wore was at least worth its weight in gold. But the observant eye of an appraiser might be able to tell you without a doubt that at least half the items he wore were worth the price of a small country. These weren't items he always had, no, most of them were previously unknown or legendary items that he found in his search for this mermaid's cure. He took off the bracelet and lifted it out toward her. She gleamed at it as he explained. "It won't undo what I've done, but it's a magic charm bracelet that will allow you to take on the form of a mermaid whenever you enter the water. It won't fix my mistake. It won't turn you back into a mermaid. But it will give your tail back to you. I know this isn't enough, it will never be. I hope at least that you'll accept it." He didn't apologize. No, he did not have the right. She looked at him, his young face that once shined with bright confidence. He was once a beauty among beauties as far as humans were concerned. Still young, but now covered in so many scars that I gave him the appearance of an old man. The final tear fell from her eye and she began to slowly rise off the ground as he looked down at the hand that held the charm. On it were 5 golden rings, one on each finger, and all glistening with power. Each one an item that most mages would give their lives for, and they all meant nothing to him. No, they were worse than nothing. They were dead ends, reminders of his failure. All of his leads, his entire life up to this point, every corner of the world, some of the most powerful mythical magical items in the world, all amounted to these 5 treasures on his hand. He could return her tail to her, but her mermaid magic would be lost forever, and none of these rings could help in the slightest. The first was a ring that doubled the mana pool of anyone who wore it. It worked by storing mana like a battery when the user wasn't casting magic. While the ring itself had an unlimited capacity, the user's body could only handle a certain amount of mana, so it could only double the mana of the caster. The next ring over doubled the power of spells, or halved the mana consumption of the spells, depending on how it was used. It would take the amount of mana that the caster used and supplement it with the same amount of mana from the surrounding environment. These 2 rings working in conjunction wasn't even a thing that mages would imagine. This allowed him to defeat a dragon, the mightiest of magical beasts, by himself. This victory then allowed him to claim the 3rd ring, which created a distortion in space-time, making it as if the first spell cast within a certain time frame ceased to exist. The ring would rewind the user's clock to the point before they used said spell, effectively making it as if they never used it in the first place. This would allow him to cast an enormous spell once every hour that would normally consume his entire mana pool without using any mana at all. Any mage could tell you how valuable this ring would be by itself without being used with the other 2. Then the 4th ring wasn't even a rumor. He stumbled upon it by mistake. This ring was similar to the previous ring, so much so that experts who knew of the existence of both might say that the previous ring was an experiment for this ring. It would completely reset the user's mana pool once per half hour after they completely ran out. But even all of these together were nothing compared to the final ring that sat on his thumb. It was a ring that defied all expectations. This ring would slowly refill the user's mana pool over time. Now, the definition of slowly varied from person to person. But this ring did so at a rate that a normal intelligent mage could be turned into a veritable endless well of mana if they used this ring correctly. Used in conjunction with his other rings though, he didn't have to use it intelligently. It turned him into a literal endless well of mana, or as literal as one could get, being a human. But the problem with all of these rings was the fact that one had to have a mana pool for them to be effective in the first place. 2 by 0 equals 0. Even if one could become an endless well of mana using these rings, one first had to have mana in order for them to be effective. As thus, none of these rings would help the mermaid regain her mana or her ability to use magic. He saw a glimpse of a fragile pale finger as her hand reached out to take the bracelet. He looked up and saw her eyes looking into his. Anyone could tell you upon closer observation that this was a young man. But alas, this man was actually old. He had the body of a youngster, not allowing himself the pleasure of aging until he completed his task. Now, he would be nearing his 120th year, meaning that this woman standing here, staring at him with her pitied eyes, had been balled up in this room, unmoving, crying, for near 100 years. A faint glimmer of a smile appeared on her face for the first time since that day. This brought him immeasurable joy. She slowly slid it onto her wrist, and with an uncharacteristic leap, she hugged him. He didn't have enough time to hug her back when she said, "Thank you," and let go. She had a tear in her eye. But this time, it was a tear of joy. He apologized. "I can't return your magic to you," she replied. "That's fine, I knew that from the start. I can't return your face or your years to you," she said in a beautiful, joy-filled voice as she lightly caressed his scars. He never imagined that she would be happy again. This was beyond expectation, something new that he learned. He had found himself learning a lot lately. "We can test it out if you like," he asked, motioning toward the aquarium that was once her home. She lightly shook her head. "No, I trust you." A tear slowly slid down his face. These words were like a dagger through his heart. The first time that he heard them from her, he had put her into this situation. He couldn't believe his own ears, but it was reality, and his experience told him not to question what he had heard, just accept it. So he asked, "Are you ready then?" Gently rubbing the bracelet, she shook her head lightly, meaning yes. He raised his staff as if to cast a spell, and out of nowhere, a large violent whirlpool appeared in the center of the rug. It was a familiar spell for her, the magic of the mermaids. How he had learned this spell, she did not know, nor did she wish to know. She only knew that she was free at last. Gently rubbing the bracelet, she slowly stumbled toward the whirlpool. He hated more than anything, using this spell here of all places. The very magic that she had lost was one of the many magics that he had gained. However, he owed it to her to see her return to where she belonged and to stop the suffering that she felt. He knew now that his journey was over. No matter how far he traveled or how long he lived, he could never again return her magic to her. And so, he chose to end her suffering and let her go. She reached the edge of the whirlpool and turned around, a large smile on her face. She jolted for him, her teeth glaring. Anyone watching this would tell him to dodge. Her teeth weren't those of a human, they were those of a predator that would happily feast on human flesh. But he didn't care. If it were just that much, he would happily go. Even so, what came next was a surprise, even for him. A gentle kiss, followed by a lovely girl jumping into a whirlpool. He lowered his staff, and the whirlpool faded into non-existence, as if it were never even there. A smile appeared on his once handsome face as he turned around and walked out. He walked to the first room once more and sat on the couch. In front of him were two small glasses filled with a strange clear liquid. It was that bitter wine. It would have been the smell to give it away if it hadn't been for the bottle standing behind the glasses. The old baby gorilla was climbing up onto the cushion after setting the glasses down. It sat up and grabbed one of the glasses. The mage did the same. With a large gulp, all of the liquid in both glasses disappeared down their throats. The gorilla was the first to speak. "Good job. I'm glad that she finally gets to be with her own. I knew you could do it. Thanks, Jonathan. So, what are your plans now?" The mage replied as he refilled the glasses. "I don't have any. So I guess I'll keep you company for a while." Jonathan smiled and gulped down another glass with the mage. "I have a question though." Jonathan looked at him with a large grin that didn't seem to match his face or his attitude up to this point as he asked, "And what would that be?" "I've already told you everything I know, haven't I?" The mage didn't return the glare, just filled the glasses, and before gulping down another shot, he asked, "What's your real name?" With a large smile, the gorilla replied, "So you've figured it out, have you?" After gulping down his third shot, the mage replied, "Yeah, I think so." Jonathan gulped down his, and as the mage refilled both glasses once more. "So, what do you plan to do now? Will you leave me alone until another comes?" The mage smiled. "No, I just said I'll give you some company for a while. I've learned a lot in these long years. But the most important thing has to be that nothing is ever as simple as it seems." The gorilla smiled as he took another gulp. "So does that mean that you'd like to hear the ramblings of a senile old cook?" The mage smiled. "Yeah." Raising his staff once again, a loud click rang out, leading to an old jazz song playing in the background. This was a song not native to this world, and even the instruments used in its concoction were a mystery. As the song played on, the gorilla began retelling the story of his life. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.